The heartbreak and the hope. The morning sun had just begun to warm the garden when I stepped outside with my cup of coffee, feeling the cool, damp soil beneath my boots. I walked over to my tomato patch, touched one of the yellowing leaves, and felt my heart sink a little. Have you ever had that moment in your own garden? Every gardener knows that quiet disappointment. You spend weeks caring for your plants, imagining baskets filled with juicy, sun-warmed tomatoes, crisp cucumbers, and bright, healthy peppers. But instead, the harvest is small, the flavor is weak, and the plants look tired, pale, and stressed. You follow the rules, you water carefully, you give your time, your effort, and your hope, yet somehow the garden still does not respond the way you expected. And that is when doubt begins to creep in. You see other gardeners holding overflowing baskets and start asking yourself, what am I doing wrong? But after many years of growing, testing, failing, and learning from the soil itself, I can tell you this. Very often it is not your fault. The missing piece may not be an expensive chemical fertilizer from the garden center. It may not be another quick fix in a shiny package. Sometimes what your garden truly needs is a tiny, forgotten biological engine beneath the surface, waiting to be awakened. Today at Earthly Delights, I want to share a simple method that has helped turn weak, struggling plants into strong, productive growers. This is not just one trick. It is a complete natural system that supports the plant from above and below, from the leaves down to the living soil around the roots. And the most beautiful part is that the ingredients are probably already sitting in your kitchen right now. So if you are ready to unlock the real potential of your tomatoes, cucumbers, and peppers, and maybe learn something about how growth works in our own lives too, stay with me. Your best harvest may be much closer than you think. Part 1. The Hidden Hunger. Understanding the Invisible World. Before we talk about the ingredients themselves, we need to understand one simple but important question. Why can plants still go hungry when they are surrounded by soil? Think of your garden soil like a huge pantry filled with food, but the door is locked and the plant does not have the key. The nutrients may be there, but the roots cannot always reach them or use them. This is what I like to call hidden hunger. A plant is always working through two systems at the same time. Above the ground, the leaves are capturing sunlight, breathing and producing energy. Below the ground, the roots are searching for water, minerals, and support. If we only pour fertilizer on the plant and forget the living world around the roots, we are only helping half of the system. After many years in the garden, I have learned that soil is never just dirt. Healthy soil is alive. It is filled with bacteria, fungi, and countless tiny organisms that help break down nutrients and make them available to the plant. When this underground life is active, roots grow stronger, plants feed better, and the whole garden becomes more resilient. But when we rely too much on harsh chemical fertilizers, we may see a fast green up at first, while quietly damaging the soil structure, stressing the roots, and weakening the plant's natural defense against pests and disease. That is why the real secret is not only feeding the plant, it is feeding the biological engine beneath it. If we ignore that engine, our plants may survive, but they will never reach their full strength. Part 2, the sweet awakening, the magic of molasses. The first ingredient in this system is something many older gardeners understood well, but modern gardening has almost forgotten: unsulfured blackstrap molasses. When I first started using molasses in the garden, I remember watching that thick, dark liquid fall from the spoon and thinking it looked more like medicine for the soil than anything else. And in a way, that is exactly what it is. Molasses is not just a baking sweetener. It is what remains after sugarcane has been boiled down several times, which leaves it lower in sugar but rich in important minerals such as calcium, magnesium, iron, and potassium. But here is the key point. Plants do not directly eat molasses the way we might imagine. We use molasses because we are not trying to feed the plant directly. We are feeding the soil life that helps the plant. The microbes in your soil need energy to work, and the natural sugars in molasses act like fuel for them. As those microbes become more active, they help unlock minerals that may already be present in the soil, but trapped in forms the roots cannot easily absorb. Through this process, they help prepare and release nutrients in a way the plant can use. In simple terms, molasses wakes up the workers in the soil pantry and helps them open the shelves for your plants. To make this simple garden tonic, mix 1 tablespoon of unsulfured blackstrap molasses into 5 liters, or about 1 gallon, of warm water. Stir well until the molasses is fully dissolved. Then pour it gently around the base of each plant as a soil drench every 1 to 2 weeks. And there is a quiet lesson here too. In the garden as in life, we often try to force results directly. But sometimes the wiser approach is to improve the environment that supports growth. Molasses reminds us that when we feed the ecosystem around something, we give it a much better chance to thrive. Part 3. The white armor, the milk shield. While the molasses is waking up life deep in the soil, we also need to protect what is happening above the ground. The leaves are where your plants breathe, gather sunlight, and build energy, so they deserve just as much attention as the roots. This brings us to the second surprising ingredient in this system: milk. Yes, the same simple milk many of us keep in the kitchen. I like to think of this as the milk shield. The mixture is very simple. Combine 200 milliliters of milk with 1.5 liters of clean, non-chlorinated water. At first, it may sound almost too simple to matter, but milk has long been used by gardeners as a natural foliar spray, especially for plants that are prone to fungal problems. When you spray this diluted milk evenly over the leaves of tomatoes, cucumbers, and peppers during the cooler hours of early morning or late afternoon, it helps create a protective layer across the foliage. The proteins in milk react on the leaf surface when exposed to sunlight, supporting natural antifungal activity. This can help reduce the pressure from problems like powdery mildew, one of the most frustrating diseases for gardeners growing cucumbers and other warm season crops. Milk also brings another benefit: calcium. Tomatoes, peppers, and cucumbers need steady calcium support when they are setting and developing fruit. When calcium is lacking or not moving properly through the plant, gardeners often see blossom end rot, that dark, sunken patch at the bottom of tomatoes that can ruin fruit just when it looked promising. By applying diluted milk as a foliar spray, we give the plant another pathway of support through the leaves, instead of relying only on the roots to find and move calcium from the soil. It is a gentle method, but in a balanced garden system, gentle methods can be powerful. And that is the lesson here. Protection does not always have to be harsh, toxic, or complicated. Sometimes the strongest shield comes from something simple, natural, and quietly effective. Part 4. The bubbling engine, active dry yeast. Now we return to the soil for the next important part of this system, and this is where things become especially interesting. We are going to make a simple growth booster using active dry yeast. Start with 4 liters of completely chlorine-free water. If you are using tap water, let it sit uncovered for about 24 hours first, because chlorine can harm the very microbes we are trying to encourage. Once the water is ready, add 2 tablespoons of active dry yeast, the same kind many people use for baking bread. Yeast is not just a kitchen ingredient. It is a living organism, a type of fungus, and when it becomes active in water and enters the soil environment, it can help support a chain of biological activity around the roots. As yeast begins to metabolize, it releases carbon dioxide into the root zone. A healthier root zone encourages roots to stretch, branch, and explore more soil. The more root surface a plant has, the better it can take up water and nutrients, especially during the demanding stages of flowering and fruit production. Yeast can also produce B vitamins, including B1, B2, and B6. These compounds act like natural biostimulants, supporting enzyme activity and helping the plant maintain stronger growth. And when beneficial organisms become more active in the soil, they also help compete with harmful organisms. They do not need to fight with harsh chemicals. They simply take up space and help shift the soil environment in a healthier direction. After mixing the yeast into the water, cover the container and let it rest for about 2 hours until the mixture becomes foamy and bubbly. That bubbling is a sign of life waking up. Then pour it in a ring around the base of your mature plants, keeping the focus near the root zone. Every time I see yeast come alive like that, it reminds me that growth often begins quietly. Many plants, and many people too, carry hidden potential inside them. Sometimes all they need is the right warmth, the right environment, and a little time to begin breathing life into everything around them. Part 5. The silent anchor, bone meal. At this point, our plants are being protected from above and energized from below. But now comes the question every gardener truly cares about. How do we turn healthy growth into a heavy harvest? For that, we need a quiet but powerful foundation, bone meal. One of the most common frustrations I see in gardens is this. The plants look strong, green, and full of leaves, yet they produce very few flowers and even fewer good fruits. In many cases, the missing piece is phosphorus. Nitrogen pushes leafy growth, but phosphorus supports deeper roots, stronger flowering, and better fruit production. Just 1 tablespoon of finely ground bone meal can help support that underground process. You can mix it lightly into the soil at planting time, or gently scratch it into the surface around established plants. Bone meal works slowly, which is exactly why I like it. It does not shock the plant with a sudden rush. Instead, it supports the soil microbes, and those microbes gradually help release phosphorus and calcium as the plant needs them. With this steady support, tomatoes can form more blossoms and hold on to them better. Cucumbers can grow stronger vines and keep producing for a longer season. Peppers can develop larger, firmer, heavier fruit with better overall strength. This kind of slow nourishment is very different from the hard push of chemical fertilizers. It teaches us something important. Real, lasting success rarely happens all at once. It is usually built through steady effort, quiet patience, and deep roots that form before the harvest ever appears. Part 6. The Mythbusters, Baking Soda and Epsom Salt. As we learn what to add to the garden, we also need to understand what not to add. The internet is full of garden hacks, miracle cures, and quick tricks, but a good gardener learns to look past the trend and pay attention to what the plant and soil actually need. You may have heard people say that sprinkling baking soda on the soil will make tomatoes sweeter. I know it sounds tempting, but this is a myth. Tomato flavor is influenced mostly by sunlight, temperature, plant variety, and overall growing conditions, not by simply changing the soil with baking soda. Baking soda is sodium bicarbonate, and sodium is not something you want building up in your garden soil. Too much sodium can damage plant roots, harm soil structure, and create long-term problems. Baking soda may have limited use as part of a foliar spray with oil for powdery mildew, but it should not be dumped into the soil around your plants. Now let's talk about Epsom salt. Many gardeners believe it cures blossom end rot, but that is another common misunderstanding. Blossom end rot is connected to calcium deficiency or poor calcium movement inside the plant. Epsom salt is magnesium sulfate, which means it contains magnesium and sulfur, but no calcium at all. Even worse, if your soil already has enough magnesium, adding more can make the problem harder. Magnesium can compete with calcium, making it more difficult for the plant to absorb the calcium it needs. So using Epsom salt without a soil test may actually increase the risk of the very problem you are trying to solve. True wisdom in the garden is not only knowing what to use, it is also knowing what to leave alone. We need to choose truth over trends and patience over shortcuts. Part 7. The Master Schedule, the Dual System. Now let's bring the whole system together. The real power is not in doing one dramatic treatment and expecting miracles overnight. The power is in consistency. We are supporting the plant in 2 directions at the same time, from below through the soil and from above through the leaves. I call this the 8-week master schedule. In week 1, apply the yeast and molasses growth booster as a soil drench around the base of your plants, preferably in the early morning or evening. This feeds the living soil and helps activate the root zone. In week 2, apply the milk shield as a fine foliar spray over the leaves. Make sure to cover both the top and underside of the leaves because that is where many fungal issues begin. In week 3, return to the soil with the growth booster. In week 4, go back to the milk shield. Continue this alternating rhythm through the growing season. The milk helps protect the foliage and provides calcium support from above. The yeast and molasses help activate microbial life and strengthen root activity from below. These 2 parts do not compete with each other. They work together as a balanced system. During the first 2 weeks, you may not see a dramatic change right away. That is normal. The most important work is happening beneath the surface, where the soil life is beginning to shift. But by weeks 4 to 6, the difference often becomes much easier to notice. Leaves become deeper green, stems thicken, side branches become stronger, and more flowers stay on the plant long enough to become healthy, even fruit. That is the beauty of a biologically intelligent system. Each week builds on the week before. The plant becomes stronger step by step. And in the garden, just like in life, consistency is often the quiet force that changes everything. We do not have to be perfect in one day. We simply have to show up, keep going, and do the gentle work. Part 8. Cultivating the Unseen. Lessons for our lives. The first year I used this system, the change in my garden honestly surprised me. Plants that had once looked tired, with yellowing leaves and average fruit, began to grow with a new kind of strength. The tomatoes became more abundant and sweeter, the cucumbers pushed out vigorous vines, and the peppers kept producing beautifully right up until the first frost. But the harvest was not the only lesson that season gave me. The garden reminded me of something deeper. We live in a world that pays so much attention to the surface, to what can be seen, measured, rushed, and forced. We want fast results, quick growth, and instant proof that something is working. But nature has never worked that way. Nature begins in the hidden places first. When we feed soil microbes with molasses, when we wake up the soil with the living energy of yeast, when we give slow, steady support through bone meal and milk, we are doing more than chasing a bigger harvest. We are choosing to trust the unseen foundation beneath the plant. That is where real strength begins. The healthiest plants are not built only by what we spray on the leaves or what we see above the soil. They are built by strong roots, active soil life, balanced nutrients, and quiet consistency that most people never notice. And maybe our lives are not so different. Sometimes we focus so much on the leaves, the outward success, the visible progress, the things other people can see, but we forget to care for the roots, our peace, our health, our patience, our inner strength, and the quiet parts of ourselves that support everything else. When the foundation is healed and nourished, the blooming becomes much more natural. Outro, the invitation to grow. Your tomatoes, cucumbers, and peppers do not need more expensive chemicals to become productive. What they need is a better system. They need a complete, natural approach that respects both sides of plant growth, the leaves above the soil and the living world beneath it. You do not have to change everything about the way you garden. Keep your soil, your sunlight, your watering routine, and your care. Just begin adding these simple kitchen ingredients with consistency and let the system do its work over time. Use molasses and yeast to wake up the soil. Use milk to help protect the leaves and support calcium needs. Use bone meal as a slow, steady anchor for roots, flowers, and fruit. When these pieces work together, your garden begins to respond in a way that feels almost magical, but it is really just nature being supported properly. If this message helped you see your garden in a new way, I hope you will subscribe to Earthly Delights, turn on the notification bell, and share this video with another gardener who may need a little encouragement this season. Together, we are building a community that believes healthy soil creates healthy crops, and a well-nourished foundation creates a more beautiful life. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Keep your hands in the soil, keep your face toward the sun, and I will see you in the next video. Happy growing.